The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 months after Daniel's funeral. Sarah Mitchell stared at it through the kitchen window, watching the postal carrier retreat down the gravel driveway of their modest suburban home. The envelope sat there in the mailbox, ordinary and unremarkable, yet somehow radiating significance in the pale autumn sunlight. She didn't want to retrieve it, didn't want to open whatever official communication awaited inside. 6 months of condolence cards, insurance forms, and estate paperwork. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Had taught her that envelopes never brought good news to widows. But 12-year-old Lucas would be home from school soon, and she couldn't let him see her standing at the window, paralyzed by fear of her own mailbox. Sarah forced herself outside, feet crunching over fallen leaves that Daniel would have raked by now, would have composted, would have turned into something useful. Because that was who Daniel had been, a man who transformed decay into growth, who found purpose in tending things, who made their small corner of the world bloom. Or at least, that was who she thought he'd been. The envelope bore no return address, just her name in typed letters, Mrs. Sarah Mitchell. Inside, she found a single key, attached to a business card for a storage facility in Millbrook, 30 miles away. On the back, someone had written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, "If you're reading this, I'm gone. Unit 247. Everything I couldn't tell you is there. I'm sorry, Sarah. Protect Lucas." Her hands trembled, the key cold against her palm. Daniel had been an accountant at a small firm downtown. Their life had been predictable, comfortable, unremarkable. He left for work at 7:30 each morning, returned by 6, spent evenings helping Lucas with homework, and weekends maintaining their modest house and garden. 15 years of marriage without secrets. Or so she'd believed. The funeral had been well attended, but subdued colleagues from his content, firm, neighbors, a few college friends. The heart attack had been sudden, massive, irreversible. At 42, Daniel had simply collapsed in his office, gone before the paramedics arrived. The doctor said, "These things happened sometimes, hidden weaknesses in otherwise healthy men." But this key suggested other hidden things. Sarah heard the school bus 2 blocks away and quickly pocketed the envelope. Lucas didn't need more mysteries surrounding his father's death. The boy had barely spoken since the funeral, retreating into video games and solitude, his grief manifesting as silence rather than tears. "Hey, Mum." Lucas dropped his backpack by the door, his dark hair, so like Daniel's, falling across eyes that had lost their spark. "What's for dinner?" "I was thinking maybe we could order pizza," Sarah offered, knowing it would get at least a small smile. It did, briefly, before Lucas retreated to his room. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, examining the key. The storage facility's address pulled up easily on her phone. A sprawling complex of identical beige units in an industrial part of Millbrook she'd never had reason to visit. She could drive there tomorrow while Lucas was at school, but something made her hesitate. Daniel's note carried a weight beyond its simple words. Everything I couldn't tell you. What couldn't a man tell his wife? What secrets required a storage unit 30 miles from home? Her sister Jennifer, called as Sarah, was getting ready for bed. "Just checking in," Jennifer said, her voice carefully casual in the way it had been since the funeral. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," Sarah replied, the lie automatic now. She almost mentioned the key, then stopped. Daniel's note had said to protect Lucas, until she knew what she was protecting him from. Sharing felt dangerous. "The girls miss Lucas," Jennifer continued. "Why don't you both come for dinner this weekend? Get out of that house. For a while." Sarah agreed, made small talk, and ended the call. But sleep wouldn't come. She lay in the bedroom she'd shared with Daniel, staring at his empty side of the bed, and wondered what version of her husband had written that note. Morning brought no clarity, just determination. After dropping Lucas at school, Sarah drove to Millbrook, the key burning like accusation in her pocket. The storage facility sprawled across several acres, unit after identical unit stretching in neat rows. She found Unit 247 in a back corner, away from the main office. The key turned smoothly, the lock well maintained. Sarah raised the rolling door, and sunlight flooded into darkness, revealing a space that made her breath catch. This was no ordinary storage unit. Daniel had transformed it into something else entirely. A command center, an office, a life she'd never known existed. One wall displayed maps, marked with colored pins and handwritten notes. Another held filing cabinets, their drawers, labeled with names and dates. A desk dominated the center, covered in documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. But it was the wall of photographs that drew her attention. Dozens of images showing people she'd never seen, locations she didn't recognize, buildings with foreign signage, and among them, in the center like a spider in a web, a single photograph of a man whose face made Sarah's blood run cold. Victor Castellano. The name was written beneath the photo in Daniel's handwriting, underlined 3 times. Sarah knew that name. Everyone knew that name. He'd been arrested 2 years ago in a massive federal investigation into money laundering and organized crime. The trial had dominated news cycles for months before he was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. What did Daniel have to do with Victor Castellano? Sarah moved deeper into the unit, her accountant husband's hidden world, revealing itself with each step. The filing cabinets contained meticulously organized records, bank statements, wire transfers, shell company registrations, all documenting a financial network that appeared to funnel millions of dollars through legitimate businesses. Daniel's handwriting filled the margins with calculations and annotations. One file was labeled Insurance. Inside, Sarah found life insurance policies, not the modest policy Daniel had with his firm, but private policies totaling $8 million, all naming her and Lucas as beneficiaries. The policies had been purchased over the past 5 years through different companies, structured to avoid triggering reporting requirements. $8 million. From an accountant who'd never mentioned any such policies. Her phone rang, making her jump. Jennifer again. Sarah let it go to voicemail, unable to explain where she was or what she was discovering. A laptop sat on the desk, password protected. Sarah tried Daniel's usual passwords: Lucas's birthday, their anniversary, his mother's name. None worked. Then, on instinct, she tried the date of Victor Castellano's arrest. The screen unlocked. The files were extensive, organized with the same meticulous care Daniel had brought to their family finances. But these weren't household budgets or tax returns. These were detailed records of an investigation, surveillance logs, financial analyses, witness statements. Daniel hadn't just tracked Victor Castellano's criminal empire. He'd helped build the case that brought it down. But Daniel was an accountant at a small firm. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't a federal agent. How had he been involved in bringing down one of the country's most notorious criminals? A folder labeled Contingency contained the answer, and it made Sarah's world tilt on its axis. Daniel hadn't been an accountant investigating Castellano. He'd been Castellano's accountant, part of the inner circle managing the money that flowed through the criminal empire. And then, for reasons detailed in a series of letters he'd written but never sent, Daniel had turned informant. "I never meant to get involved," one letter began, addressed to Sarah, but clearly never intended to be delivered until after his death. "When I took the job at Morrison Associates, I thought it was just another small firm. By the time I realized what Morrison really did, who he really worked for, I was already complicit." If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. I'd signed documents, moved money, helped structure deals. I was part of it. Sarah's hands shook as she read further. Daniel described how he'd discovered Morrison. Associates was a front, laundering money for Castellano's network. How he'd initially been terrified, then morally horrified at what he was facilitating. How he'd wrestled with the decision to approach federal authorities, knowing it would endanger everything. I thought about running, the letter continued, taking you and Lucas and disappearing. But where would we go? And for how long? Castellano's reach extended across continents. The only real safety was bringing him down entirely. So Daniel had become an informant, secretly copying files, documenting transactions, recording conversations. For 3 years, he'd maintained his role as loyal accountant while systematically building the case that would eventually destroy Castellano's empire. He'd worn a wire to meetings. He'd photographed documents in the middle of the night. He'd lived a double life, the strain of it invisible to the wife who slept beside him. End. I couldn't tell you, another letter explained. The FBI said keeping you ignorant was safer. If Castellano ever suspected, if anyone in his organization realized what I was doing, they'd look at everyone close to me. They'd question you, hurt you. Take Lucas. Your innocence protected you. The trial had ended 2 years ago with Castellano's conviction. Daniel had testified under seal, his identity protected. But the letter described his ongoing fear even after the trial's conclusion. Castellano's organization didn't die with his arrest, Daniel wrote. His lieutenants are still out there, still dangerous. I've been told I'm safe, that the protective measures in place are sufficient. But I've seen what these people are capable of. I've documented their violence. If something happens to me, if this letter reaches you, you need to know the truth. And you need to know how to protect yourself and Lucas. The final letter, dated a week before his death, contained instructions. The insurance policies will provide for you and Lucas. I structured them to appear legitimate, to avoid suspicion. The money is clean. I earned it through consulting work the FBI arranged as payment for my cooperation. It's yours and Lucas's future, bought with my testimony. But there's more. Castellano's organization maintained multiple safe houses and bunkers, places to hide money and evidence. I documented all of them during my cooperation with the FBI. Most were raided. But there's one they never found, because I never told them about it. Sarah's breath caught. She read the next paragraph 3 times, unable to process what Daniel was claiming. Before I turned informant, Castellano ordered me to set up a final contingency, an underground bunker, at a property in rural Idaho, filled with cash and bearer bonds totaling approximately $30 million. It was his escape fund, his insurance if everything collapsed. By the time I learned about it, I'd already begun cooperating with the FBI. I should have reported it, but I couldn't. The letter explained Daniel's reasoning with painful honesty. If I told the FBI about the bunker, they'd seize the money. But I knew Castellano would be convicted. I knew he'd spend decades in prison. And I knew that money represented my family's real security. Not just financial, but protection. The FBI's witness protection is good, but it's not permanent. Eventually, you blend back into normal life. Eventually, Castellano's people might find you. But with that money, you'd have options, resources, the ability to disappear completely if necessary. Daniel had kept the bunker secret, had documented its location and contents, but hidden that information even from his federal handlers. It was insurance for his family, purchased with silence and deception. The property is in my name, bought through a shell company I never disclosed to the FBI. The letter continued. The deed and keys are in a safe deposit box at First National Bank in Millbrook. Box 1847. The key is in this unit, taped under the desk drawer. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, I know I've shattered your trust. But please understand everything I did, every lie I told, every secret I kept, was to protect you and Lucas. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But I've left you a way forward, a way to ensure neither of you ever has to fear Castellano's organization again. Sarah sat in Daniel's hidden office, surrounded by evidence of a life she'd never imagined, and tried to comprehend the impossible. Her husband's steady, predictable Daniel had been part of organized crime, had become an informant, had helped destroy a criminal empire, and had hidden $30 million in an underground bunker in Idaho as insurance for a family he'd never told about any of it. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was insane, that she should contact the FBI immediately, that hiding criminal proceeds made her complicit in ways that could destroy her and Lucas. But another part, the part that had watched Lucas retreat into silent grief, the part that had worried about how they'd afford college, the part that had lain awake, wondering how to build a future from the wreckage of Daniel's death, that part whispered different calculations. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Lucas's school. Mrs. Mitchell, Lucas got into a fight during lunch. Nothing serious, but we need you to come pick Tim up. Sarah closed the laptop, locked the unit, and drove back to face her son's crisis. Daniel's revelations burning in her mind like fever. She'd need time to process everything, to decide what to do about the bunker and the money, and the impossible position Daniel had left them in. But as she drove, another worry surfaced. Daniel had died of a heart attack. Sudden, unexpected, at 42, with no warning. The doctors had called it tragic but random, one of those medical mysteries that sometimes claims seemingly healthy people. But Daniel had been terrified in his final letters, had believed Castellano's organization might still be hunting him, and heart attacks, Sarah knew from the true crime podcasts she sometimes listened to, could be induced. Certain drugs, undetectable after death, could trigger cardiac arrest that appeared completely natural. What if Daniel's death hadn't been random at all? Lucas sat in the principal's office, a bruise forming on his cheek, knuckles, scraped and bloodied. The other boy, apparently, had made a comment about Daniel, something cruel about dead fathers. Lucas had responded with fists. "I'm sorry, Mom," Lucas mumbled on the drive home, staring out the window. I couldn't let him say that about Dad." Sarah reached over, squeezed his hand. "I understand, honey. I do. But fighting isn't the answer." "Then what is?" Lucas turned to her, eyes suddenly fierce with anger she hadn't seen since the funeral. "Everyone acts like Dad was perfect. Like losing him is this sad accident we just have to accept. But what if it wasn't? What if someone—" He trailed off, unable to voice the thought. "What if someone—" "What?" Sarah asked carefully. "Nothing. Never mind." Lucas withdrew again, the moment of openness closing as quickly as it had appeared. But that night, after Lucas was asleep, Sarah returned to the storage unit. She had to know more, had to understand the full extent of Daniel's involvement and the danger it might still pose. The laptop revealed file after file of damning evidence, not just against Castellano, but against dozens of associates, money launderers, corrupt officials who'd been part of the network. And in a folder marked Active Threats, Sarah found surveillance photos taken by Daniel in the months before his death. Photos of men watching their house. Photos of unfamiliar cars parked on their street. Photos of someone following Lucas to school. Daniel had known. In those final weeks, he'd realized Castellano's people had found him. The letters became more urgent, more detailed about the bunker and how to access it. The last entry, dated 3 days before his death, simply read, "If something happens, remember, the bunker is safety. The bunker is survival. Take Lucas and run." Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the surveillance photos, recognizing locations near their home. near Lucas's school, near the grocery store where she shopped. These men had been hunting Daniel, and possibly her family, for weeks before his death. The heart attack suddenly seemed less like tragedy and more like execution. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know you were at the storage unit. We know what Daniel left you. Walk away, Mrs. Mitchell. Forget what you found. It's the only way you and Lucas survive." Fear crystallized into fury. These people, whoever they were, had killed her husband, had terrorized her family, had destroyed the life she'd built. And now they expected her to simply walk away, to accept their threats, to live in fear? Sarah thought about the $8 million in insurance policies, about the $30 million in the Idaho bunker, about the evidence Daniel had compiled, about 12-year-old Lucas grieving a father stolen by criminals who thought they were untouchable. She texted back, "You should have left us alone." Then she began planning. Not retreat, not submission, but something else entirely. If Daniel had taught her anything in their years together, it was that careful planning and meticulous execution could accomplish what seemed impossible. He'd brought down a criminal empire by being methodical, strategic, patient. Sarah could be those things too. The next morning, she withdrew Lucas from school, telling the principal it was a family emergency. She cleaned out their bank accounts, packed 2 suitcases, and loaded Lucas into their car with minimal explanation. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked, confused and frightened by the sudden upheaval. "On an adventure," Sarah replied, forcing confidence into her voice. "Your dad left us something important. We're going to get it. And then, we're going to be safe. Really safe. Forever safe." They drove to Millbrook first, to the bank where Daniel's safe deposit box waited. The key from the storage unit opened it easily, revealing the deed to property in Idaho and detailed instructions for accessing the bunker. There was also a burner phone with a single number programmed in, labeled Emergency, FBI Agent Rivera. Sarah pocketed the phone but didn't call. Not yet. Not until she knew what she was dealing with. The drive to Idaho took 3 days. They stayed in roadside motels, paid cash, avoided cameras when possible. Sarah watched for tails, varied their routes, took precautions Daniel's notes had suggested. Lucas asked fewer questions than she'd expected, as if some part of him understood they were running from something serious. The property sat at the end of a dirt road in dense forest, hours from the nearest town. A small cabin, weathered and unremarkable, sat on 5 acres of isolated wilderness. Nothing about it suggested secrets or hidden wealth. That, Sarah realized, was precisely the point. The bunker entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the cabin's basement, accessible through a combination lock. Daniel's instructions detailed. Sarah's hands shook as she input the code, half expecting nothing to happen. The whole thing revealed as some elaborate delusion. But the wall clicked open, revealing a steel door and a staircase leading down into darkness. The bunker itself was sophisticated beyond anything Sarah had imagined. Multiple rooms carved out of rock, reinforced with concrete, equipped with ventilation systems and backup power. The main chamber held exactly what Daniel had promised. Rows of bankers' boxes filled with cash and bearer bonds, all meticulously organized and documented. Sarah did rough math in her head. $30 million, give or take. A fortune built on crime, but now hidden away, waiting for its original owner who would never claim it. "Mom?" Lucas stood at the bunker entrance, eyes wide. "What is all this?" Sarah turned to her son. This 12-year-old boy who'd lost so much already, who deserved truth, even if it was complicated and frightening. "It's your father's final gift to us, and it's proof of something he did that was very brave, but also very dangerous." Over the next hour, sitting in that underground bunker surrounded by money taken from criminals, Sarah told Lucas an edited version of the truth, that his father had worked for bad people, that he'd tried to make it right by helping the FBI, that he'd hidden this money as insurance for their family, that the people he'd helped arrest might have killed him for it. Lucas processed this with remarkable calm, his young face thoughtful rather than shocked. So Dad was like a secret hero? In a way, Sarah agreed, though the reality was more complicated. He did wrong things for wrong people, but then he tried to fix it. He protected us the only way he knew how. And now we have all this money? Lucas gestured at the boxes surrounding them. What do we do with it? Sarah had been wrestling with that question since discovering Daniel's letters. The moral answer was clear. Report it to authorities. Let them seize the ill-gotten gains. Maintain their integrity. But morality was complicated when criminal organizations were hunting your family, when your husband had died, protecting secrets that could still kill you. I don't know yet, she admitted to Lucas. But I know we need to be smart about it. We can't just walk into a bank with $30 million. We need a plan. They spent 2 days at the cabin, Sarah carefully documenting everything in the bunker, photographing the evidence, copying Daniel's notes onto external drives. She wanted leverage, insurance that if Castellano's people came after them, she could threaten to release everything to authorities. On the third morning, Sarah finally called the number Daniel had left. FBI agent Rivera answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Mitchell," Rivera said, her voice unsurprised. "I was wondering when you'd reach out. Your husband told me if anything happened to him, you might eventually discover his insurance policy." "You knew about the bunker?" Sarah asked, uncertain whether to be relieved or frightened. "Suspected," Rivera corrected. "Daniel was too good at what he did to not have contingencies. I figured he'd kept something back, though I never knew what or where. The fact that you're calling suggests you've found it." Sarah made a decision. "I need protection. For Lucas and myself. Real protection. Not witness relocation that eventually ends. And I need immunity for taking possession of money I know came from criminal activity." Rivera was quiet for a long moment. "That's asking for a lot. I have a lot to offer," Sarah countered. Daniel left extensive records. Names of people in Castellano's organization who were never charged. Financial trails that connect to legitimate businesses. Evidence that could reopen cases, lead to new arrests, dismantle what's left of the network. And the money goes to the FBI, minus compensation for Daniel's years of cooperation and the danger he put his family in. Call it a finder's fee if you want. But I want it in writing, legal, unassailable, and I want the resources to disappear if necessary. Rivera considered this. "Come to the Denver field office. Bring whatever evidence you have. We'll talk." Sarah had learned caution from Daniel's example. "I'll send copies of the evidence first. You review it, confirm its value. Then we meet publicly, somewhere with cameras and witnesses. Once we have a deal in writing, I'll tell you where the bunker is. You don't trust easily, Mrs. Mitchell." "My husband was murdered for trusting the wrong people," Sarah replied. "I won't make the same mistake." They negotiated for 2 more weeks, Sarah and Lucas staying at the Idaho cabin, while Rivera worked through FBI bureaucracy to arrange immunity and protection. Sarah used the time to organize the evidence more thoroughly, to create a comprehensive record of everything Daniel had documented. She also made multiple copies on encrypted drives, hidden in various locations. If anything happened to her, if the FBI betrayed her trust, if Castellano's people found them, those drives would automatically go to journalists, senators, international law enforcement agencies. It was mutually assured destruction, a deterrent that would keep everyone honest. The meeting with Rivera finally happened at a coffee shop in downtown Boise. Chosen for its crowds and security cameras, Rivera arrived with legal documents granting Sarah immunity in exchange for evidence and testimony about Daniel's cooperation. The deal included $2 million in compensation for material assistance in ongoing investigations, far less than the bunker contained, but enough to start over legitimately. The rest of the money, Sarah asked, as she signed the papers, will be seized as proceeds of criminal activity, Rivera confirmed. But between the compensation and your husband's legitimate life insurance policies, you're looking at $10 million total. That's more than generous given the circumstances. Sarah nodded, accepting the deal. $10 million was enough, more than enough, and it came with the protection she needed, the assurance that Castellano's remaining associates would know coming after her family would trigger the release of evidence that would destroy whatever remained of their organization. 3 months later, Sarah and Lucas moved into a new house in a quiet suburb of Denver, under new identities arranged by the FBI. Lucas enrolled in a new school under his new name, slowly building a life that didn't carry the weight of Daniel's secrets. The $2 million in compensation, carefully invested, would ensure his college education and beyond. But on the anniversary of Daniel's death, Sarah drove back to the Idaho cabin one final time. The bunker had been emptied by the FBI, the money seized, the evidence catalogued, yet the space itself remained, a monument to her husband's complicated legacy. She stood in the empty chamber, where millions had once been hidden, and spoke to the man she'd loved, the man she'd never fully known. "You tried to protect us," she said to the silence. "You did terrible things, and then tried to make them right. You lied to me for years, but those lies kept Lucas and me alive. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I should, but I understand why you did it. And I used what you left us to finish what you started." The remaining members of Castellano's organization had been arrested in a coordinated operation built on Daniel's evidence. The network was truly destroyed now, not just damaged but eliminated. Sarah's testimony, combined with the documents from the bunker, had made that possible. "We're safe now," she continued. "Really safe. Lucas is doing better. He still misses you, still gets angry sometimes about the secrets, but he's proud too, in his way. Proud that his father helped stop bad people, even if it cost him everything." Sarah placed a photograph in the empty bunker, one of the few family pictures from before Daniel's double life began. Her, Daniel, and infant Lucas, all smiling in a moment of uncomplicated happiness, before crime and fear and secrets, before everything fell apart, and then somehow came back together in a different configuration. "Thank you for the bunker," she whispered. "Not for the money, though that helped, but for the evidence, for the proof that even when you were doing wrong things, you were trying to build something right. For showing me that sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to become someone they can't recognize." She climbed the stairs one last time, sealed the bunker behind her, and drove away from the cabin in the Idaho wilderness. Behind her, buried in rock and concrete, remained the empty space where $30 million had waited. Ahead of her stretched a new life, built on the foundation of her husband's final sacrifice. It wasn't the life Sarah had expected when she married Daniel 15 years ago. It wasn't the life she would have chosen. But it was theirs, now her and Lucas's bought, with secrets and survival, with money taken from criminals, and evidence that brought them justice. As she drove through the forest toward the highway that would take her home, Sarah thought about inheritance, not just money or property, but the complicated legacies we leave behind. Daniel had left her secrets and danger, and impossible choices, but he'd also left her strength she didn't know she possessed, courage to face threats that would have destroyed most people, and the resources to build a future for their son. The treasure in the bunker hadn't been the money. It had been the proof that even in darkness, even when compromised and corrupt, Daniel had been fighting to protect his family the only way he knew how. That treasure, that knowledge, was worth more than any amount of cash. Sarah reached the highway, turned toward Denver, toward Lucas, waiting at home, toward the future they would build together. The bunker was empty now, but what it had contained would echo through their lives forever. Not as shame or regret, but as foundation, the proof that sometimes the greatest gift you can leave the people you love is the truth, no matter how terrible, and the means to survive that truth. In the rearview mirror, the forest receded. In her heart, so did the fear that had haunted her since Daniel's death. They were safe now, really safe. And if that safety had come from her husband's crimes and his redemption, from money hidden in underground darkness, and evidence that brought criminals to justice, then so be it. Some inheritances are measured in dollars, others in truth. Daniel had left them both, and Sarah would use every bit of it to give Lucas the life his father had died trying to provide. The Denver house felt like sanctuary for the first 6 months. Sarah had chosen it carefully, a modest 2-story, in a neighborhood of young families and retirees, the kind of place where people minded their own business but noticed strangers. The kind of place where Lucas could ride his bike to the corner store without her heart climbing into her throat. But on a Thursday morning in late spring, sanctuary cracked. Sarah was sorting mail when she found it a postcard, with no stamp, no postmark, just a photograph of the Idaho cabin. On the back, in handwriting that made her blood freeze, were 4 words: "The bunker wasn't empty." Her hands trembled as she turned the card over again, studying the image. It showed the cabin from an angle she recognized, the same vantage point from which she'd taken her final photograph before leaving. Someone had been there recently. Someone who knew what the property meant. Lucas was at school, thank God. Sarah immediately activated the security system. Daniel's FBI contacts had installed cameras at every entrance, motion sensors in the yard, panic buttons in every room. Then she called the number Rivera had given her for emergencies. The bunker was completely cleared, Rivera said, after Sarah explained the postcard. My team supervised the removal personally. Every dollar, every document. It was empty. Then someone's playing games, Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Or Daniel left something else. Something even you didn't know about. Rivera was quiet for a long moment. I'll send protection to your house. Don't leave. Don't let Lucas leave. I'm coming personally. The wait was excruciating. Sarah stood at the living room window, watching the street for threats she wouldn't recognize until too late. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had Daniel hidden something more in the bunker? Had Castellano's remaining associates discovered the location? Was this revenge or extortion, or something else entirely? Rivera arrived within 2 hours, accompanied by 2 agents Sarah didn't recognize. They swept the house for bugs, checked the perimeter, confirmed the security system was functioning. Only then did Rivera sit across from Sarah at the kitchen table, the postcard between them. Tell me everything about the bunker, Rivera said. Every detail, no matter how small. Sarah walked through her memories. The hidden entrance, the multiple chambers, the boxes of cash and bonds. But as she spoke, something nagged at her, a detail she'd noticed, but not questioned at the time. There was a second door, she said slowly, in the back of the main chamber. I assumed it was utilities or storage. I never opened it. Rivera's expression sharpened. Show me the photographs you took. Sarah pulled up the files on her laptop, scrolling through hundreds of images documenting the bunker's contents. There, in the background of several shots, was the door she'd mentioned. Steel, like the main entrance, but smaller, with a different kind of lock. A keypad rather than a combination dial. That wasn't in the original blueprints Daniel provided, Rivera muttered, studying the image. We cleared everything in the main chamber. But if there's a secondary space, then what? Sarah demanded. What could Daniel have hidden that even you didn't know about? Rivera's jaw tightened. Information worth killing for. Documents that could reopen cases we thought were closed. Evidence that could bring down people in positions of power who thought they were safe. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Lucas's school. Early dismissal today, due to maintenance issues. Please pick up your son by 2 p.m. Except Sarah had checked the school calendar that morning. There were no early dismissals scheduled, and the text came from a number she didn't recognize, not the school's official line. "It's a trap," she said, showing Rivera the message. "They're trying to get me to leave the house." Rivera was already on her phone, calling the school directly. Her face went pale as she listened. There's no early dismissal, and Lucas isn't in his classroom. He left with a woman claiming to be his aunt 20 minutes ago. The world tilted. Sarah gripped the table edge, fighting the wave of terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "Jennifer, my sister, but she's in Phoenix. She wouldn't—" "Someone impersonating your sister," Rivera interrupted. Where would Lucas go if he felt unsafe? If he realized something was wrong? Sarah forced herself to think past the panic. Lucas was smart, observant, trained by her these past months to recognize danger. If someone grabbed him, if he escaped, or got a chance to run, where would he go? "The library," she said. 3 blocks from school. "We have a code if anything happens. Meet at the library. 2nd floor. Behind the reference section, where you can see both exits." They were in Rivera's car within minutes, agents following in a second vehicle. Sarah's mind conjured terrible scenarios. Lucas hurt, Lucas taken, Lucas disappearing, like his father had promised, would never happen if she just followed his carefully laid plans. The library appeared quiet as they pulled up. Normal afternoon crowd of students and retirees. But Sarah spotted him immediately. Lucas pressed against the reference section's back wall, trying to be invisible. His backpack clutched to his chest like armor. She was out of the car before Rivera could stop her, running through the library entrance, taking stairs 2 at a time. Lucas saw her coming and burst into tears, 12 years old but suddenly looking much younger as he threw himself into her arms. "A woman came to school," he gasped between sobs. "She knew your name, knew Aunt Jennifer, knew about Dad, but something felt wrong. The way she smiled, the way she kept touching my shoulder. So when we got to the parking lot, I ran." Sarah held him tight, breathing in the smell of his shampoo, feeling his heart racing against her chest. "You did exactly right. You were so smart, baby. So brave." Rivera approached cautiously, giving them space, but maintaining vigilance. "Lucas, did either woman say anything specific? Mention any names or places?" Lucas pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes. "She said, my mom needed me to come with her. That there was an emergency about my dad's estate. She used those exact words, 'your dad's estate.' But you always call it what Dad left us. Never estate." That's when I knew she was lying. Pride warred with terror in Sarah's chest. Daniel had prepared their son better than she'd realized. The careful language, the attention to detail, the understanding that danger could wear friendly faces, all of it had saved Lucas from whatever that woman intended. Back at the house under FBI protection, Rivera made calls while Sarah and Lucas huddled together on the couch. The woman who'd attempted to take Lucas had disappeared, of course. School security footage showed her arriving in a sedan with dealer plates, leaving alone when Lucas bolted. The car would be untraceable, the plates stolen, the woman probably already in another state. "They're escalating," Rivera said after her final call. "Whoever sent that postcard and tried to grab Lucas, they're not just making threats. They want something specific, and they believe you have it, or can get it. The second room in the bunker," Sarah realized. "They think I can access whatever Daniel left there." Rivera nodded grimly. "Which means we need to get there first. Before they realize you genuinely don't know what's behind that door." The plan came together quickly. Rivera would take Sarah back to Idaho under heavy protection. leaving Lucas with agents at a safe house outside Denver. They'd enter the bunker, access the secondary chamber, and retrieve whatever Daniel had hidden. Then they'd use whatever it was to leverage the people hunting Sarah's family into permanent neutralization. But Lucas refused to be left behind. "Dad left that stuff for us," he insisted, his young face set with stubborn determination. Sarah recognized from her own mirror. "For Mum and me. I should be there when we find out what it is." Rivera started to argue, but Sarah raised a hand. "He's right. Daniel included him in this legacy. Lucas deserves to see it through." They flew to Boise the next morning on a small FBI charter, then drove the familiar route to the cabin in an unmarked convoy. The property looked exactly as Sarah remembered: isolated, unremarkable. The cabin weathered by winter into greater dilapidation. Nothing suggested the sophisticated bunker hidden beneath. The entrance was already disturbed. One of Rivera's agents reported after checking the perimeter. "Someone's been here recently. Past 48 hours, maybe less." They entered the cabin cautiously, weapons drawn, clearing each room before descending to the basement. The false wall stood open, the bunker entrance visible. Someone had indeed been here, had known exactly where to look. The main chamber was as Sarah remembered, empty now, the boxes gone, only dust and shadows remaining. But the secondary door at the back seemed to glow with possibility, its keypad waiting for a code Sarah didn't possess. "Daniel would have made it memorable," she said, studying the pad. "Something we'd know, but strangers wouldn't." Lucas stepped forward, his face thoughtful. "Try my birthday. Month, day, year. He always said the day I was born was the most important day of his life." Sarah input the numbers. 0,7,5, 2,0,1,2. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked, and the door swung inward, revealing another staircase leading deeper into the earth. The chamber beyond was smaller than the main bunker, but far more sophisticated. Computer servers lined one wall, their lights blinking steadily despite years of apparent isolation. The opposite wall displayed monitors showing live feeds. Sarah recognized their Denver house, Lucas's school, Jennifer's home in Phoenix, even Rivera's FBI office. "Daniel's been watching us," Sarah whispered, horrified and awed. "All this time, even after he died, he set up surveillance to keep monitoring." "Not watching," Rivera corrected, examining the servers. "Protecting. This is an automated system. Recording, analyzing, sending alerts if it detected threats near people Daniel cared about." She pulled up logs on one monitor. It flagged the woman who tried to take Lucas, sent warnings to multiple email addresses, including one, "I recognize a journalist who broke the original Castellano story." Lucas had moved to a desk in the corner, where an envelope sat addressed in Daniel's handwriting. "For Lucas, when he's old enough to understand." "I'm old enough now," Lucas said quietly, opening the envelope before Sarah could stop him. Inside was a letter and a USB drive. Lucas read silently, his expression cycling through confusion, anger, and finally, understanding. When he finished, he handed both to Sarah. "Dad knew he was going to die," Lucas said, his voice steady despite tears on his cheeks. "Not random heart attack. He knew they'd figured out a way to kill him that would look natural. He wrote this a week before it happened." Sarah's hands shook as she read Daniel's final words to his son. "Lucas, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry for the danger. Sorry for not being the simple, honest father you deserved. But I need you to understand why I made the choices I did. The money in the main bunker was insurance for your mother, a way to ensure she'd never be financially vulnerable, never be forced into bad situations because of poverty. But what's in this secondary chamber is insurance of a different kind. It's information, names, evidence, connections between people in power, and Castellano's organization that even the FBI doesn't know about. I couldn't give this to the FBI while I was alive. Too many people in positions of authority who'd bury it, who'd make sure it never saw light. But after I'm gone, after you and your mother have had time to get safe, this information becomes your ultimate protection, mutual assured destruction. If anything happens to your family, if anyone from that world comes after you, these files go public, to journalists, to senators, to international authorities who can't be bought or threatened. I've set up dead man's switches, automated releases, fail-safes upon fail-safes, but someone needs to understand the system, maintain it, add new protections as technology changes. Your mother will keep you safe in the short term. But you, Lucas, you'll keep the family safe long term. You have my analytical mind, my attention to detail. You can learn these systems, master them, become the guardian of our family's security. I wish I could be there to teach you. I wish I could see the man you'll become. But since I can't, I'm leaving you the tools to protect yourself and your mother from anyone who'd hurt you because of my past. Be smart, be careful, be brave, and know that everything I did, every crime, every betrayal, every secret, was because I loved you and your mother more than my own life. That love is what destroyed me in the end, but it's also what will save you. Sarah pulled Lucas close, both of them crying now, grieving Daniel all over again with new understanding of just how much he'd sacrificed. Rivera was documenting the servers, copying files, her expression growing darker as she reviewed their contents. Sarah, this is bigger than Castellano. Federal judges, senators, police chiefs in 6 major cities, all connected to the money laundering network. Some of them helped put Castellano away specifically so they could take over his operation without competition. Including people in the FBI? Sarah asked. Rivera's silence was answer enough, which is why Daniel couldn't trust official channels, Sarah realized. Why he set up this parallel system. He wasn't just protecting us from criminals. He was protecting us from the very people it's supposed to stop criminals. They spent 6 hours in that chamber, Rivera's team copying everything, while Sarah and Lucas explored the full extent of Daniel's final gift. Beyond the surveillance and evidence, Daniel had set up trusts, investments, educational funds, all legal, all traceable to legitimate sources. The criminal money had been his first insurance, but this secondary chamber represented his true legacy: clean wealth, protective information, and the systems to maintain both indefinitely. Mom, there's a video file addressed to both of us, Lucas called, from the main computer, dated the day before Dad died. Sarah joined him, and together they watched Daniel's face appear on screen, tired, scared, but resolute. He looked directly at the camera, as if he could see them watching across the distance of years. Sarah, Lucas, if you're seeing this, I failed to stop them in time. I'm sorry. I fought to stay alive, to be there for you both. But they were too smart, too connected. They found a way past every protection. But they didn't win completely, because what I've left in this chamber will haunt them forever. Every person who helped kill me, every official who covered it up, every criminal who thought they'd gotten away, they're all documented here. And they'll spend the rest of their lives knowing that one wrong move against my family will expose them. Sarah, you're the strongest person I've ever known. Strong enough to survive losing me. Strong enough to protect Lucas. Strong enough to make impossible choices and live with them. Take what I've left and build something good from it. Not for me, not to honor my memory, but for yourselves, for the future you both deserve. Lucas, my son, by now you know your father was no hero. I did terrible things, worked for terrible people, only tried to fix it when I had no choice. But you can be different. You can take these tools I'm leaving and use them not to hurt or hide, but to protect people who can't protect themselves. You have that chance because of what I did. Don't waste it. I love you both. More than words can express. More than my actions ever showed. That love is the only pure thing I have to leave you. Everything else is tainted by my choices. But my love for you, that's clean. That's true. Hold on to it when everything else gets complicated. Stay safe. Stay together. And don't let my mistakes define your future. The screen went dark. Sarah and Lucas sat in silence, processing their final message from a man who'd been dead for over a year, but whose presence suddenly felt immediate and real again. We need to decide, Rivera said gently, what to do with all this information. I can't officially acknowledge most of what's here without triggering investigations that would put you both at risk. But if we selectively leak certain evidence to the right journalists, we expose the worst offenders without revealing the full extent of what Daniel left us. Sarah finished. Keep the ultimate leverage hidden but demonstrate we have teeth. Rivera nodded. It would require careful coordination, trust in people outside official channels, and ongoing maintenance of these systems to ensure the protection remains active. Sarah looked at Lucas, seeing not the 12-year-old boy who'd lost his father, but the young man he was becoming, thoughtful, brave, capable of understanding complexity and moral ambiguity. Daniel had been right. Lucas had inherited his analytical mind, his strategic thinking. Given time and training, he would become the guardian their family needed. We'll do it, Sarah decided. But on our terms. We choose what gets released and when. We control the narrative. And if anyone comes after us, the floodgates open completely. Over the next 3 months, carefully selected evidence began appearing in major newspapers and news networks. A federal judge's connection to money laundering. A police chief's protection of drug operations. A senator's offshore accounts tied to Castellano's organization. Each revelation was devastating, specific, undeniable, and each came with an anonymous note. More will be revealed if those responsible do not confess and face justice. Some officials fled the country, others took plea deals, accepting lighter sentences in exchange for testimony against colleagues. The network Daniel had helped build and then tried to destroy finally collapsed completely, torn down by the evidence he'd collected and his family's determination to use it. Sarah and Lucas never returned to the Idaho cabin. They sold the property through intermediaries, the bunker's entrance sealed permanently, its secrets extracted and deployed. The new owners would never know what had been hidden beneath their innocent-looking retreat. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah wondered about the legacy they were building. Daniel had started as an accountant who'd compromised his integrity for a paycheck. He'd ended as an informant who'd saved his family by becoming someone unrecognizable. Now, Sarah and Lucas were guardians of information powerful enough to destroy lives, protectors of secrets that made them both safer and more dangerous. Was this better than the simple life they'd had before? The one where Daniel was just an accountant, and she was just a mother, and Lucas was just a kid? Or had Daniel's choices condemned them all to a future of permanent vigilance, always watching for threats, always ready to deploy weapons of information against anyone who came too close? She didn't have answers. Only the certainty that she'd do whatever necessary to keep Lucas safe, just as Daniel had done for them both. The bunker might be empty now, its cash seized, and its evidence deployed. But its real treasure, the knowledge of how far they'd go to protect each other, remained. And that, Sarah realized, was inheritance enough. 5 years passed like water through fingers sometimes, rushing, sometimes still, but always moving forward. Lucas turned 17. No longer the grieving 12-year-old who'd run to the library, but a young man who understood that safety was something you built, not something given. He'd learned the systems Daniel left behind, mastered the surveillance networks, understood the dead man's switches that protected their family from shadows that never quite disappeared. Sarah watched her son work at the computer in their home office, his fingers moving across keyboards with the same precise confidence Daniel had once shown with spreadsheets and financial documents. Different tools, same analytical mind. The inheritance had skipped a generation in form, but not in substance. "Mom, we have a problem," Lucas said without looking up from his screens. "Someone's been probing our systems. Not aggressive, just testing. Seeing what we have, what we know." Sarah moved behind him, studying the data streams she'd learned to read over the years. "Can you trace them?" "Already did. IP address traces back to a law firm in Washington, D.C. Garrison. Wells. Corporate defense. White-collar crime. The kind of place that represents people who can afford the best lawyers money can buy." The name meant nothing to Sarah, but Lucas was already pulling up more information. "They've represented 3 of the people we exposed with Dad's files. The police chief from Baltimore, that federal judge in Chicago, and," he paused, fingers stilling on the keyboard, "Victor Castellano." Sarah's blood went cold. Castellano's been in federal prison for 7 years. Why would his lawyers be interested in us now? Lucas pulled up a news article, dated 3 weeks earlier. "Victor Castellano, granted new trial, due to procedural irregularities." The accompanying photo showed Castellano, older, grayer, but with the same cold intelligence in his eyes that Sarah recognized from Daniel's surveillance photos. "He's getting out," Lucas said quietly. "The appeals court found problems with how evidence was handled during his original trial. They're ordering a new trial, and his lawyers are arguing he should be released on bail pending proceedings." Sarah sank into the chair beside her son, mind racing through implications. If Castellano was released, even temporarily, he'd have resources and freedom to act on whatever grudge he'd nursed during 7 years of imprisonment. And if his lawyers were probing their systems, he knew about Daniel's role in his conviction, knew about the evidence, knew about the family that had inherited his betrayer's secrets. "We need to contact Rivera," Sarah said, already reaching for the secure phone they kept for emergencies. But Lucas shook his head. "Rivera retired 6 months ago, moved to Florida with her husband. The FBI contact number we have goes to someone named Agent Marcus Chen now. I've never met him, never established trust." This was Daniel's nightmare scenario, the carefully built protections degrading over time as people retired, systems aged, and new threats emerged that old contingencies hadn't anticipated. They'd maintained the technical infrastructure, but the human networks had quietly dissolved. "Then, we reach out to the journalists," Sarah decided. "The ones who broke the original stories. They have reason to want Castellano to stay locked up." Over the next week, Sarah and Lucas worked to shore up their defenses. They contacted 4 journalists who'd published stories based on Daniel's evidence, creating a network of people who'd release more information if anything happened to the Millers. They upgraded their security systems, added new surveillance cameras, and established emergency protocols that would trigger automatic evidence releases if either of them failed to check in regularly. But, on a Tuesday afternoon, their careful planning proved insufficient. Sarah was at the grocery store when her phone buzzed with an alert from their home security system. Multiple motion sensors triggered simultaneously. Cameras disabled. Lucas's panic button activated, then went silent after 3 seconds. She abandoned her cart and ran for the parking lot, calling 911 as she drove. But she knew with the horrible certainty of someone who'd already lost too much, that police response would be too slow. By the time officers arrived, Lucas would be gone, or worse. The house looked normal from outside. No broken windows, no obvious signs of forced entry. But Sarah's hands shook as she unlocked the door, her mind conjuring terrible images of what she might find inside. The living room was undisturbed, kitchen empty, Lucas's bedroom door stood open, his computer still running, screens displaying the same data streams he'd been monitoring. But Lucas himself was gone, his backpack missing, his phone lying on the desk, deliberately left behind. A note sat propped against the keyboard, typed on plain paper. Your son is safe. For now, we need to talk about your husband's insurance policy. The real one. Not the bunker the FBI seized. Come to the address below. Alone. You have 4 hours. The address was a warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place where screams wouldn't be noticed, and bodies could disappear. Every instinct Sarah had developed over 5 years of vigilance screamed trap, but every instinct of motherhood screamed louder. She had 3 hours and 45 minutes to decide. Trust the police who might be compromised, trust the FBI agent she'd never met, or walk into an obvious trap to save her son. Sarah chose the fourth option, one Daniel's training had prepared her for, but she'd hoped never to use. The warehouse district was exactly as grim as expected: abandoned buildings, broken windows, streets empty of legitimate business. Sarah parked 2 blocks from the address, then sent a text to a number she'd never used before. Piano keys need tuning. The coded message would trigger multiple, automated responses. Evidence dumps to journalists, notifications to law firms, releases to international agencies. If Sarah and Lucas didn't cancel those releases within 12 hours, everything Daniel had collected, everything they'd added over 5 years, would go public. Every corrupt official, every criminal connection, every piece of leverage they'd carefully maintained would be exposed. It was mutually assured destruction, the ultimate dead man's switch, and it was about to be activated. Sarah entered the warehouse through a side door, gun drawn, senses hyper-alert. The interior was vast and dark, filled with abandoned equipment and shadows that could hide anything. She moved carefully, using cover, watching for ambush. Mrs. Mitchell. The voice came from the warehouse's center, where emergency lights created a circle of illumination. A man stood there, 50s, expensive suit, confident posture. Not a thug, but something worse. A professional. Thank you for coming. And for leaving your weapon on the floor before approaching. We both know you're outmatched here. Sarah set her gun down carefully, kicked it away, then stepped into the light. Lucas sat tied to a chair 10 feet from the man, duct tape across his mouth, but eyes alert and uninjured. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed fear. They'd kept him alive for leverage, which meant they wanted something she could give. Who are you? Sarah demanded. James Garrison, senior partner at Garrison Wells. I represent Mr. Castellano's interests. Garrison gestured to a second man emerging from shadows, Victor Castellano himself, somehow free despite supposedly being incarcerated pending his new trial. How? Sarah started. Money buys many things, Mrs. Mitchell. Bail, despite prosecutor objections. Friendly judges. Guards who don't notice when important clients need temporary absences. Castellano moved closer, studying her with the same cold intelligence from his. Photographs. Your husband caused me significant inconvenience. 7 years of my life, gone. My organization, destroyed. My reputation, shattered. All because a small-time accountant decided to play hero. Daniel did the right thing, Sarah said, voice steadier than she felt. You were a criminal. You hurt people. He stopped you. Castellano smiled without warmth. He betrayed me. Betrayed the trust I placed in him. Betrayed the opportunities I gave him. And then he died before I could make him understand the consequences of that betrayal. You killed him, Sarah said flatly. Made it look like a heart attack. I did nothing, Castellano replied. I was in federal custody when your husband's heart gave out. Tragic, but random. These things happen. His expression made clear, He knew exactly how Daniel had died, even if he'd been behind bars when it occurred. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "The FBI seized everything from the bunker. The money, the bonds, all of it. There's nothing left." Garrison spoke up. "We're not interested in money, Mrs. Mitchell. We're interested in the evidence your husband collected. The files he held back from federal authorities. The information you've been using to blackmail our clients." "It's not blackmail," Sarah corrected. "It's insurance. Leave us alone, and those files stay private. Come after us, and everything goes public." "Yes, your dead man switches," Castellano said dismissively. "Very clever. Very Daniel. But here's the problem: my new trial starts in 6 months. The prosecutors plan to use your husband's sealed testimony, present evidence he collected. If that happens, I'm convicted again. But if that evidence is tainted, compromised, shown to be part of a larger scheme of blackmail and extortion," he smiled, "then it becomes inadmissible. My conviction gets overturned, and I walk free." Sarah understood. They weren't trying to destroy the evidence. They were trying to corrupt it, to create legal grounds for dismissal. If they could prove she'd been using Daniel's files for blackmail, everything he'd collected would be tainted fruit, legally poisoned. "You're going to confess," Garrison continued. "Admit that you've been extorting money from our clients using stolen information. Sign a statement to that effect. And in exchange, we'll return your son unharmed and disappear from your lives. And if I refuse," Castellano's expression hardened, "then Lucas learns what his father learned, that betrayal has consequences." Sarah looked at her son, seeing the fear he was trying to hide, the trust in his eyes, that she'd find a way to save him. She thought about Daniel, about the impossible choices he'd faced, about how he'd chosen to protect them at the cost of everything else. "I need guarantees," Sarah said slowly. "Proof that if I sign your statement, you'll really leave us alone. Not just today, but permanently." Garrison produced documents from his briefcase. "A binding agreement. You confess to extortion. We ensure no criminal charges are filed against you, and all parties agree to cease any further contact. Legally enforceable, notarized, witnessed." Sarah took the papers, pretending to read while her mind raced. In 90 minutes, her automated releases would trigger if she didn't cancel them. But she couldn't cancel them without her phone, which she'd left in the car. And if she signed this confession, if she admitted to crimes she hadn't committed, it would destroy Daniel's legacy and free the people he'd died to stop. But Lucas was right there, terrified and helpless. Her son, her everything. "I'll sign," Sarah said. "But first, I need to make sure my son is actually safe. Remove the tape. Untee him. Let me see he's unharmed." Castellano nodded to someone in the shadows. 2 large men emerged, moving toward Lucas. But as they reached to untee him, Lucas moved faster than Sarah expected, his hands somehow free, duct tape already cut. He lunged sideways, rolling behind equipment as confusion erupted. The warehouse exploded with sound and light. FBI agents poured through every entrance, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Sarah hit the ground as chaos engulfed the space. Castellano's men reaching for weapons, Garrison trying to run, Lucas scrambling toward his mother through the confusion. "FBI! Nobody move! Agent Marcus Chen." Sarah recognized him from photos. Lucas had researched, led the operation with professional precision. Within minutes, Castellano was in handcuffs, Garrison was being read his rights, and a dozen of their associates were being secured by federal agents. Chen approached Sarah and Lucas, his expression mixing concern and approval. "Your son's emergency signal contained interesting information. Wire transfers to judges, communications arranging Castellano's release, evidence of witness tampering. When it all hit our systems simultaneously, We moved fast. Sarah stared at Lucas. The panic button. You triggered it on purpose. Lucas nodded, pulling a small recording device from his pocket. Got everything on tape. Castellano, admitting to involvement in Dad's death. Garrison describing the scheme to taint evidence. All of it. And I uploaded it to our secure servers before they grabbed me. You used yourself as bait, Sarah said, torn between fury and pride. I used Dad's playbook, Lucas corrected. Act weak when you're strong. Give them confidence. Let them reveal themselves while you're recording everything. He glanced at Chen. Agent Chen's been investigating Castellano's early release for weeks. When he contacted me 3 days ago about the irregularities, we worked out a plan. Sarah pulled her son into a fierce embrace, understanding flooding through her. Lucas hadn't been kidnapped. He'd been gathering evidence. The supposed attack on their home had been staged to draw out Castellano and his associates. Her 17-year-old son had orchestrated a sting operation using skills learned from his father's files and 5 years of maintaining their security systems. You should have told me, Sarah whispered against his hair. You would have tried to stop me, or insisted on being involved, which would have put you at risk. Lucas pulled back, meeting her eyes with disturbing maturity. This is what Dad trained me for, Mom. To protect us when you couldn't. To be smart instead of just strong. Chen cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Mrs. Mitchell, your son showed remarkable capability. The evidence he collected will put Castellano away permanently, along with 3 corrupt judges and a dozen associates who thought they'd gotten away clean. He paused. The FBI would like to discuss your family's ongoing security arrangements. The systems your husband set up. The information you've been maintaining. We'd like to bring it into official channels. No, Sarah said immediately. Those systems stay independent. That's the only way they work outside official channels, beyond reach of anyone who might be compromised. Chen nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. Then, at least let us coordinate. You maintain your systems, but you have a direct line to people who can act on what you find. Partnership, instead of isolation. Sarah looked at Lucas, seeing the question in his eyes. They'd been alone in this for 5 years, trusting no one outside their carefully controlled network. But isolation had nearly gotten them both killed today. Maybe it was time to accept help, even if that help came with strings attached. We'll consider it, Sarah said. But the evidence stays under our control. And if we ever suspect compromise, we disappear. That's non-negotiable. Fair enough, Chen agreed. Over the next weeks, as Castellano's new trial collapsed under the weight of his recorded confession, as corrupt officials fell like dominoes under renewed investigation, Sarah and Lucas negotiated a new arrangement with the FBI. They maintained their systems and independence, but established communication channels with agents. Chen vouched for personally. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than standing alone against threats that kept evolving. Lucas graduated high school that spring, accepted to MIT, with a full scholarship funded by the legitimate consulting work Daniel had done for the FBI. He'd study computer science and information security, building on skills learned from necessity into expertise that could protect others beyond just his family. Your father would be proud, Sarah told him the night before he left for college. Not just of what you've accomplished, but who you've become. Lucas was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had been hovering between them for months. Do you ever wish Dad had just stayed an accountant? That he'd never gotten involved with Castellano, never turned informant, never left us this whole complicated mess? Sarah considered carefully. I wish he hadn't died. I wish you'd had your father through high school and beyond. I wish we'd lived simple, uncomplicated lives. She paused. But if Daniel had stayed silent, if he'd kept being complicit, could I have loved that version of him? Could you be proud to be his son? Maybe the Daniel who tried to make things right, who protected us the only way he knew how. Maybe that's the father you were meant to have. Even though it got him killed? Lucas pressed. Especially because of that, Sarah said. Because it meant he valued doing right more than staying safe. That's a legacy worth inheriting, even with all its complications. Lucas left for MIT, carrying more than textbooks and clothes. He carried Daniel's flash drives, encrypted backups of 5 years of carefully maintained evidence, and the knowledge that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but the tools to protect others from darkness. Sarah stood in the driveway, watching her son drive, away toward a future built on his father's sacrifice. The bunker in Idaho was empty now, sealed forever. The money was spent or seized, the bearer bonds cashed, the physical treasure dispersed. But the real inheritance, Daniel's courage, his redemption, his determination to protect family at any cost that remained, passed from father to son, in ways neither could have predicted when Daniel first typed those passwords and hid those files. Some treasures can't be stolen because they're not kept in bunkers or bank accounts. They're kept in the hearts of the people left behind, in the choices they make, in the legacy they choose to honor or reject. Daniel had left them both money and meaning, security and sacrifice. Sarah and Lucas had taken what he offered and built something new from it. That was inheritance enough. That was treasure beyond price. And as Sarah returned to the house she'd made safe through vigilance and carefully deployed information, she understood that Daniel's greatest gift hadn't been the millions in cash or the evidence that brought down criminals. It had been teaching them that protection sometimes requires becoming dangerous, that safety sometimes demands risk, and that love often means making impossible choices and living with their consequences. The bunker was empty, but the family it had protected remained, scarred but surviving, forever changed but still standing. And that, in the end, was the only treasure that truly mattered. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.